The world had almost forgotten how silent moments could scream louder than any spoken words, but then came the whispers, the kind of whispers that fans pick up, dissect, and cherish as proof of something deeper than cameras ever capture. It wasn't a headline, nor a breaking scandal, but the smallest tilt of a head, the briefest flicker of a smile, the way two lives once intertwined still managed to leave shadows on each other's present. The story of Wang Yibo and Xiao Zhan had always been written in fragments, coded in their laughter, their silence, and the spaces in between. And now, fans were once again convinced. The gestures, as tiny as they seemed, were enough to reveal that care still lingered, alive and undeniable. It started with a glance, one that lasted no more than a heartbeat. At an award show, the cameras moved too quickly, the lights too bright, and yet the internet froze that moment. Xiao Zhan walked across the stage, poised, collected, his usual calm shielding him from the frenzy of flashing bulbs. But there it was, Wang Yibo's eyes, shifting subtly, following his figure with a trace of something unspoken. It wasn't longing, not entirely, nor was it casual indifference. It was recognition. The kind you don't fake, the kind that slips out before the walls are rebuilt. Fans replayed it endlessly, frame by frame, until they were certain. The care was still there. And then came the scarf incident. Winter had draped its chill across Beijing, and Xiao Zhan appeared outside a rehearsal venue, bundled yet elegant, his scarf loosely tied. Hours later, Wang Yibo was seen at the very same venue, different timing, different purpose. But his scarf? Nearly identical in color and texture. The internet erupted, calling it coincidence, calling it styling, but those who had watched them since The Untamed knew better. They remembered the early days, when borrowed scarves and shared warmth weren't just practicalities, but quiet exchanges of comfort. To outsiders it was fabric, to fans it was a message stitched in memory. I still think of you when the cold bites. Even on stage, where professionalism demanded perfection, the cracks of humanity showed. During a variety show segment, the cast broke into laughter after a light-hearted challenge. Xiao Zhan's laugh, warm, ringing, impossible to ignore, echoed across the studio. And though Wang Yibo tried to mask it, the corners of his mouth betrayed him. The way he turned his head, hiding the smile, was enough for sharp-eyed viewers to catch. They shared that clip like wildfire, captioning it with phrases like, "Some connections can't be erased," and "The heart remembers what the mind tries to forget." It wasn't the loud, performative laughter of someone indulging in entertainment. It was private amusement slipping into public view, sparked by a voice he hadn't even directly addressed. Then came the most telling of them all, a gesture so subtle, it might have gone unnoticed had it not been for the persistence of fandom. At a fan meet, Wang Yibo received a gift, a handmade bracelet, delicate and understated. Weeks later, Xiao Zhan appeared in a candid photo, and on his wrist was a bracelet strikingly similar, if not identical. Fans compared angles, colors, even the knots of the thread. Whether it was deliberate or a coincidence didn't matter. What mattered was how it reignited belief, that some exchanges never reached the headlines because they were never meant to. They live in secret, where meaning thrives best. And perhaps the most emotional of all gestures was silence itself. When questions arose in interviews, when the media tried to pry, neither man indulged the curiosity. They didn't fan flames, nor did they attempt to erase history. Instead, they answered with respect, a refusal to diminish what once existed between them. Silence, in their world, wasn't absence. It was protection. Fans, tuned into every nuance, understood this perfectly. Protecting each other from unnecessary scrutiny was the kind of care louder than any public declaration. The rhythm of their connection played out in ways the casual observer might never see. The way Wang Yibo unconsciously leaned when Xiao Zhan's name was mentioned, the subtle pause in Xiao Zhan's speech when recalling their shared past, the mirroring gestures during group events that happened too often to dismiss. Fans became detectives, stringing together these fragments, not because they demanded proof, but because they understood the language of subtlety. Love or care doesn't always announce itself in grand declarations. Sometimes it lingers in the smallest details, waiting for the ones who know how to listen. The whispers grew louder, not because the gestures became grander, but because fans had learned how to read the quiet things. It was in the rhythm of everyday life that Wang Yibo and Xiao Zhan seemed to leave pieces of each other, hidden yet visible to those who cared enough to notice. For those who had watched their journey unfold, these subtle moments weren't coincidences. They were a language, an unspoken dialogue that had never quite ended. Take, for example, the award season in Shanghai. Both men were present, though carefully seated apart. Cameras darted from one star to another, catching rehearsed smiles and practiced poses. But when Xiao Zhan took the stage to present, something shifted. He walked with his usual calm grace, voice steady, expression gentle. In the audience, Wang Yibo sat still, his usual composure unbroken. Yet for a second, just a fraction of a second, his hand stilled mid-motion, his gaze tightening. It was nothing a casual viewer would think twice about, but for fans it was everything. That brief stillness spoke of recognition, of focus, of someone who couldn't quite ignore the presence of someone significant. And as the applause roared, Yibo clapped, measured, restrained, but with a softness fans swore they had never seen directed at anyone else. Then there was the airport incident, the kind that fueled weeks of discussion. Xiao Zhan had been spotted arriving at a terminal, his usual understated fashion sense drawing admiration. Hours later, Wang Yibo appeared at a different gate of the same airport. No interactions were captured, no pictures showed them together. And yet, the detail that fans clung to was the mask. Xiao Zhan's had been a muted gray, with a distinct stitching along the side. Hours later, Wang Yibo appeared in almost the same shade, with the same stitch detail, only reversed. Fans compared images side by side, insisting it wasn't accidental. In a world of limitless fashion options, why this similarity? The answer, to them, was obvious. Some choices are silent tributes. Music, too, became a vessel of suspicion. During one of Wang Yibo's interviews, he casually mentioned a song he had been listening to, a track not widely popular but carrying lyrics about memory and unspoken bonds. Weeks later, Xiao Zhan, during a live stream, hummed a line from the very same song without naming it. The fandom lit up instantly. Was it random? Maybe. But fans remembered how, during their filming days, the two often exchanged music recommendations, weaving soundtracks into the fabric of their friendship. The fact that both were still humming the same tune years later was, to their audience, nothing short of fate bleeding through playlists. But perhaps the most compelling proof came from moments of instinct. During a live event, chaos erupted when fans surged forward unexpectedly. The stars on stage were taken aback, shifting nervously as security intervened. Amid the confusion, Xiao Zhan flinched slightly, his body recoiling at the sudden movement. Instantly, though separated by distance, Wang Yibo's gaze shot toward him. His body leaned forward as though ready to act, though he didn't move further. It was a reflexive reaction, but one captured by sharp-eyed fans who knew how to freeze a frame. That protective instinct, they argued, didn't simply vanish. It lingered, dormant but alive, surfacing when it was least expected. Even their projects seemed to echo each other in strange, poetic ways. When Xiao Zhan starred in a commercial featuring a handwritten letter, fans noticed the closing line, a phrase about writing freely without fear. The wording felt eerily reminiscent of Wang Yibo's known love for motorbikes, his freedom on the road a symbol of his independence. A coincidence? Maybe. But fans chose to believe it was a nod, a quiet acknowledgement that even in separate careers, they carried fragments of shared metaphors. The gestures were not always visible. Sometimes they were absences, deliberate choices not to erase. In one magazine shoot, Xiao Zhan wore a ring fans swore they had seen in older photos from a time when Wang Yibo was often present. The ring wasn't flashy, nor was it promoted as a styled accessory. It was personal, understated, and when fans zoomed in, they recognized it instantly. It wasn't about the object itself, but about memory made tangible. To wear it again in public was, to them, a sign. The past wasn't something to be hidden, but something quietly carried. And then came the birthdays. Fans had long given up expecting open messages or public celebrations between the two. Yet, each year, without fail, something subtle appeared. On Wang Yibo's birthday, Xiao Zhan would post at midnight, not a direct greeting, but a photo or caption whose timing spoke volumes. Likewise, when Xiao Zhan's birthday arrived, Wang Yibo would surface with a seemingly random activity, a photo of a cake, a casual post, a song lyric, that always seemed too aligned to be random. The world saw routine updates, fans saw coded exchanges. But perhaps the most moving evidence wasn't caught on stage or screen, but in the way fans themselves responded. They weren't delusional, nor did they expect grand reunions. What they wanted was recognition that the small gestures mattered, that care didn't always need to be shouted to be real. They built entire threads online, compiling side-by-side images, matching details, and tracing connections like constellations. And in those constellations, a bigger picture formed, two stars moving on their own paths, but still aligned enough to cast shadows on each other. It was in those tiny, almost invisible gestures that truth revealed itself. The flick of a glance, the echo of a song, the match of an accessory, the instinctive tilt of a body in someone else's direction. To the rest of the world, they were fragments too small to matter. To fans, they were everything. Proof that care, once born, doesn't die. It simply changes form, finding new ways to exist in a world that doesn't always allow it to be spoken aloud. And so the legend continued, not in headlines, not in scandals, but in the quiet persistence of gestures that outlived noise. Wang Yibo and Xiao Zhan didn't need to tell the world they still cared. Their hands, their choices, their silence already had.